morning, everybody, to this AGORADA 2020 this morning. I have the honor of welcoming you to our annual event, though slightly in a different setting than what we're used to. However, I think we've gotten used to many online events by now, so it's quite exciting to be here in any case. I have the honor of welcoming this morning Mr. Pieter Waasdorp, our keynote speaker. Mr. Waasdorp is the Director of Entrepreneurship at the Dutch Ministry of Finance. He's also the SME envoy for the Netherlands. And he will set the scene with a few inspiring examples from the Netherlands in terms of financing for SMEs in this difficult economic time. Mr. Waasdorp, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tessa, and thank you very much for having me on this conference. It's a pleasure to be here, and of course, regional development agencies play a crucial role in our financial ecosystem. So it's also an honor for me to speak at your annual conference. So it's a pity I cannot be here in person, but that goes for all of us. So it's not an in-person conference, but an online conference. But as has been mentioned before, we are getting used to that more and more every day. So we will make the best of it. So once again, it's an honor to be here to speak to you and tell you a little bit more about the European developments, about Dutch policy and developments, and about the COVID measures. I'm the Director for Entrepreneurship Policy in the Netherlands. I'm also the SME envoy from the European Commission for the Netherlands. My job as a Director for Entrepreneurship Policy is to make life easier for entrepreneurs. And I think you can understand that job has been quite challenging the last couple of months since COVID broke out. But that's what I want to tell you a little bit more about, what the type of measures we took to overcome the problems entrepreneurs face due to COVID. This slide tells you a little bit what I will tell you this morning. First of all, I will talk a little bit more about the European position. Yeah, next slide, please. The European position. This slide shows you, it's a heat map. It shows you the EIF-backed venture investments across Europe. And if you see correctly, also a little bit outside Europe. But of course, it's a heat map. So it shows you where the most investments are taking place. It shows you a number of hotspots. You can see Berlin as a hotspot. You see the region around Paris. Of course, London is a hotspot, which, I will come back to that later on, what the consequences of Brexit may be. But you can also see that the Netherlands is a hotspot. So that's good news. But what this slide doesn't tell you is that Europe as a whole is lagging behind in the number of venture investments and the size of the tickets. Europe as a whole is lagging behind by other economies like the US or China or other major economies. So there's remains work to be done to catch up. And that's where the next slide comes in. And to catching up, improving the European position on venture capital and financing. That's where the SME envoy network comes into place. As I told you before, I'm the SME envoy for the Netherlands, and every member state in Europe has an SME envoy. And this picture shows you one of the conferences the envoy network organized in 2016 in the Netherlands, when the Netherlands had the presidency of the European Union. And it's all, you can see all the envoys assembled. And you can also see Her Royal Highness Queen Maxima of the Netherlands standing in the front row, which was a great honor for us that she attended that SME envoy network meeting. And the focus of the SME envoy network is on improving the business climate for SMEs. I'm also the rapporteur on financing within the SME envoy network. So there's also a lot of focus on access to finance. And the previous slide showed us that we are lagging behind in Europe. So that's why I presented, together with my colleagues, a few weeks ago, a call to action to the SME envoy network and to the SME Assembly. A call to action to European institutions, to member states, to enable more innovative growth enterprises to grow for the European future by providing more access to venture capital. And of course, the good news is that there are big programs taking place. InvestEU, recovery plan by the European institutions, EIB, EIF are at the forefront. And also there are taking place a lot of member state initiatives focusing on improving the supply of venture capital. But the call to action calls to more action, more public-private partnership, more bilateral cooperation between member states. Well, it's a call to action, and it was also discussed at the European Competitiveness Council a few weeks ago. Next slide, please. Well, of course, Europe is taking its responsibility. InvestEU is a major investment plan. Well, it says here 650 billion additional investment. A lot of extra guarantee mechanisms, direct investments as well, especially by EIB and EIF. These are a number of the topics, of course. SME companies are one of the priorities, but also sustainable infrastructure, research, innovation, social investment and skills. They are at the forefront. And of course, there's also the European Recovery and Resilience Plan, which is taking place at the moment right now. Next slide, please. So that was an overview of the European position and now a slight insight into the SME Info Network. Let's focus a little bit more on the Dutch economy. And well, this slide, it shows you a picture of the Netherlands, which is a small country, but there are big numbers. There are big numbers because we have a vibrant ecosystem for venture capital. We have a vibrant ecosystem for startups and scale-ups. And this slide shows you now a couple of numbers. The number one most connected economy in the world, for example, top 10 in the world talent ranking, over 7,000 startups and scale-ups, etc., etc. So we have a vibrant situation, and at first glance, everything looks all right. But then COVID struck, and of course, as many of our colleagues also in this call, we were puzzled and we were overwhelmed what to do. But quickly we spoke to entrepreneurs and they told us what was going on. Next slide, please. Next slide. And what was going on during the COVID crisis. That came on top of the two trends which are taking place at the moment in the European economies and in the Dutch economy as well. First of all, of course, the sustainability trend, the focus on energy transition, reaching our climate goals, the Paris Climate Agreement. And the second challenge is the digitization trend, focus on digitization, especially for SMEs, making better use of all the opportunities ICT offers. And on top of that, of these big trends came COVID, and also, of course, Brexit, which is still, well, it's still a cliffhanger what will take place, but well, we are preparing for the worst and hope for the best, as the saying goes. So these two major trends, and then there came COVID, and then there came Brexit, which was, well, a slightly interesting combination. Before COVID, our policy looked a little bit like this. Next slide, please. This is a picture of the office, the Ministry of Economic Affairs. I haven't been there lately for the past couple of months because we're all working from home, of course. But sometimes I look at this picture and I say, and I think to myself, oh yeah, that's the office building where we used to go every day. This is the Ministry of Economic Affairs, and the Dutch policy pre-COVID was focusing on improving the business climate for SMEs, focusing on regulatory reform, for example. We introduced an SME test for every new law. So when government develops a new law, there has to be an SME test, and has to be a research how it will affect the SMEs. We focused a lot on digitization because that's one of the two trends. A subsidy scheme. We have the Chamber of Commerce providing information and advice for entrepreneurs. A lot of focus on innovation, investing in R&D, in high-tech systems, in quantum technologies, in electronics, engineering, logistics, etc. Also, a lot of focus on access to human capital. It's not only not only enough to invest a lot in R&D, but you have to have the right people, the right skilled people, of course, as an entrepreneur. And of course, a lot of focus on access to finance, because that's one of the foremost problems entrepreneurs face: how to attract finance, how to finance my investment plans. So that was pre-COVID, and then there was COVID. Next slide, please. And when we look at the startup and scale-up ecosystem, it was pretty vibrant, as I showed you a couple of slides before. There's a lot of venture capital available for the startups and scale-ups. Not enough, because also in the Netherlands, we are lagging behind in the bigger tickets. It's difficult to finance the bigger tickets, and it's also difficult to finance at the lower end of the financial market. Next slide, please. Next slide. And when COVID struck, especially these type of companies was hit very hard, these startups and scale-ups. We have the TechLeap organization, which is the organization which focuses on startups and scale-ups. It is headed by His Royal Highness Prince Constantine of the Netherlands, and they lobby for the favorable investment climate for startups and scale-ups. They have a lot of insights and research. And the TechLeap organization carried out a survey a couple of weeks into the COVID crisis. And because of that survey, we realized that we were undertaking a lot of support measures for ordinary SMEs. We are taking a lot of support measures, subsidy schemes for bigger companies. But these type of companies, the startups and the scale-ups, they were falling behind. They could not make use of most of those COVID schemes. And they said to TechLeap and to us that the number one problem, and it says here on the top of the chart, is bridge funding. They found it immediately almost impossible to attract sufficient bridge funding, to attract sufficient working capital. Because, well, the suppliers, the investors of venture capital, they were becoming hesitant. These type of companies, they're relatively young, so they don't have a lot of reserves. Their solvability is relatively low. So they immediately had a problem, no bridge funding. Next slide, please. And that's where the regional development corporations come into place. Well, there are 8 of them in the Netherlands, as you probably know. And together with the National Development Corporation, or the National Promotional Institution, InvestNL, they cover almost the whole of the Netherlands. So these regional development agencies are of crucial importance to us. So when TechLeap told us, well, these startups and scale-ups, they find it difficult to attract working capital, bridge finance, also the Regional Development Corporation stepped in. And together, they joined forces, and together with the Ministry of Economic Affairs, they came up with the so-called COVID bridge loans. Next slide, please. Next slide. The COVID, or Corona as it's called in Dutch, bridge loans. And this was set up a few months into the COVID crisis. 300 million euros extra budget available for bridging loans. Almost available for startups across the country, 9 regions. And it was a cooperation and joint effort by the regional development agencies and the TechLeap portal. And of course, it was funded by the Ministry of Economic Affairs. And I'm very proud of this program because it helped these type of companies to overcome the most immediate problems of the COVID crisis. Next slide, please. So what were the results of this COVID bridge loans? 700 to 800 companies were helped. were funded. The range of the bridge loans amounted to 50,000 to almost 2 million, 3 years duration. And of course, well, the regional development agencies carried it out, so they approved all the demands for the loans by the entrepreneurs. The tech lead organization built a portal, an ICT portal, so it was almost completely digitized. It was very quick, so entrepreneurs could get a relatively quick answer. And sometimes the answer was yes, and sometimes the answer was no, because it was no free lunch. It still is a loan. You have to pay interest, and you have to pay back the loan, of course. So it's not a subsidy, it is a loan, but it did help a lot of entrepreneurs, 700 to 800 companies. And at the moment, we are still, it's almost finished, but there's still some budget left. So we are working at closely working together with the development agencies and tech lead, how to spend in a wise way the remainder of the budget. Next slide, please. And of course, this was focused on startups and scale-ups. We did also have other COVID measures, especially targeted on the financial markets, not on startups and scale-ups, but on more the, let's say, the regular SME companies. For example, the guarantee schemes already in place. The guarantee scheme, the BMKB, it's called. It's more than 100 years old, and it's a relatively simple scheme. I'm sure every member state has a similar scheme. But what we did in the COVID crisis, a few weeks into the COVID crisis, well, actually 2 weeks into the COVID crisis, we increased the guarantee percentage. So the government guarantee in that scheme is now 75%. On top of that, we launched a specific guarantee scheme for smaller types of credits, up to 50,000 euros. There's a 95% guarantee. And also, of course, there's the credits, let's say bank, it's not really a bank, but a microfinance institution. And they supply also bridge loans, smaller loans to entrepreneurs. So these are a few numbers of the other support instruments we took. Next slide, please. It's of course, there's also the InvestNL, the National Promotion Institution, which is rather young. It started at the beginning of this year. So it's for them very difficult already to be, because they're not up and running yet in total. They have to find the right people, to find the right funding, etc. But immediately they also stepped to the plate and also joined forces. So on top of the the COVID bridge loan, they also developed a specific investment scheme, which is called the TOPS facility. Which is not as big in numbers as the Corona bridge loans, but that was not the idea. It was especially targeted for companies which were too big for the COVID bridge loans or were too risky for the COVID bridge loans. So it's a much more and not so standardized facility, but much more targeted for individual needs of entrepreneurs. So I'm very happy that also InvestNL took this initiative. Next slide, please. Well, apart from financing measures to tackle the effects of the COVID crisis, there were a lot of other temporary measures also taking place. I will not go through all of them, but the main focus was subsidy. Subsidy for retaining employees within the company. So entrepreneurs can get a subsidy to retain their employees, so they don't have to fire them. It's not 100% subsidy because they still have to pay a certain amount themselves. And also there is still a subsidy scheme for the fixed costs, which is dependent on the turnover loss due to COVID. Well, there are a lot of other schemes as well, but let's leave it at this. Next slide, please. Well, this is a little bit difficult to see, but it shows you a number of statistics on all the COVID measures. And if you look at the left-hand side of this slide, you can see the chart. And the chart says in the blue bar, it says the number of companies as a percentage of all which has made use of all the government measures. So including finance, including the subsidy scheme, the retainment of employees, etc., etc. And you can see that for the smaller companies, the upper left bar, the almost left bar, 2 to 9 people employed, more than 50% of them made use of government measures. And of course, the bigger the companies, it differs a little bit. And it's hard to say if I have to be proud of this figure or not. On the one hand, I'm proud of the figure because it says, well, what we are doing within the government really has an impact. But on the other hand, it is a little bit worrying because so many companies, in order to survive, need the government support. And that's, well, that is a little bit worrying for me personally. I'm coming to the end of my small talk. Yeah, I'm coming, no, almost to the end of my small talk, because there is still two more pieces of good news. The first one is that we are still working on new instruments. Europe is lagging behind, and also the Netherlands is lagging behind in venture capital, the bigger tickets, especially for the startups and scale-ups. And that's why the Dutch government, together with InvestNL, the National Promotion Institution, decided on an additional scale-up facility. The government put in 250 million euros, InvestNL also 250 million euros, and the EIF, the European Investment Fund, also put in 150 million euros. So together, that's 650 million euros. And it will be spent in 3 types of facilities. First is the Dutch Future Fund, which is already up and running by InvestNL. It's a fund-to-fund approach focusing on technologies. The second one is a targeted fund, the Deep Tech Fund. It will focus on deep technologies. You can think about engineering, quantum, high-tech systems. It will take place in the form of a direct investment fund. And the third program is an alternative financing fund. It will focus on non-bank financing, making it easier for non-bank financiers to attract funding through this fund. So that's good news for the financial landscape. And on top of that, the government also decided to make available another round of funding for the regional development agencies, 150 million euros extra funding for the regional development agency. So I think that's good news, and hopefully it will help a little bit in catching up in the venture capital position. And in this way, we are also answering the call to action, of course. Next slide, please. And finally, but not least, well, I started by saying that the regional development agencies play a crucial role in the financial ecosystem, and especially in the Netherlands. All the examples I gave are examples where the regional development agencies in the Netherlands played a crucial role. So I'm very proud to say that both OostNL and IQ are nominated for the EURADA awards later on during the day. And I'm looking very much forward to the ceremony, and I would like to congratulate them already beforehand. So this is the end of my little talk. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you for this interesting explanation, Mr. Waasdorp. Myself, I live really on the border with the Netherlands, so I always have my nose to the Netherlands oriented. I am a big admirer of the entrepreneurship spirit that the Netherlands carries. So I think it's really interesting, this Corona bridging loan. And I have a question, if I may. Did the ROMs have to carry out any reforms internally in order to implement these responsibilities that come with the Corona bridging loan?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Well, reforms, it's too big a word, but they had to drop all other kind of activities because they had to reshuffle all their employees, all their staff, all their investment managers to carry out this scheme from one moment to the other, almost by a figure of saying. So it was a great achievement because, well, in a few weeks' time, the portal was set up together with TechLeap. And the whole system was set up. So reform is a big word, but they had to reorganize. Maybe that's a better way to reorganize to well, to step to the plate and carry out the scheme.
Yeah, quite a big challenge. One of my colleagues dropped a question for you in the chat. I'm seeing, Mr. Wazerp, what do you consider are the most effective measures for consolidated SMEs? I wonder if the Dutch ministry is considering to reinforce your guarantee scheme for the years 21 and 22, or if you're going to relaunch the call scheme for startups. Do you envisage other effective measures for the future?
Well, thank you. Well, it's very good questions. Well, first of all, a number of those guarantee schemes will be continued in 2021. Not all of them through the end of 2021, but they will be continued at least for the first half of the year. So that's one. And the second one is what is taking place at the moment, and we're still studying it and looking into it, is that it becomes a challenge for entrepreneurs to pay back loans because they were able to attract additional finance. The tax authorities granted them a delay of payment. A lot of banks, Dutch national banks, gave them a delay of payment holidays. But there will be a moment that they will have to pay their taxes and they will have to pay back the loans to the banks. And well, we are studying and right now what the effects will be, how big that amount will be, and that will be one of the challenges for the next months, to closely monitor that development and well, to see what we can do to accommodate this development.
Okay, that's it from our side, I think. In any case, I want to thank you for your presence here. If you have the time, we would be delighted if you hold on to see the actual awards being given out later on, of course. Thank you to your staff members that helped us out a lot as well. En ik zal zeggen, heel veel goede moed voor de nieuwe lockdown.
Dankjewel, Tessa.
Dag. I will now give the floor to our colleague, Mr. Roberto Algara from IVASE, the Valencian Institute of Business and Competitiveness. Roberto, the floor is yours.
Hello, I don't know if you hear me okay?
We do, Roberto, we do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for EURADA for preparing this interesting meeting and for giving me the opportunity to moderate this roundtable, which is very complex. Well, I have to say congratulations to my previous speaker because it has given us a very good idea of how complete are the actions they are doing at their territory in the Netherlands. And now we are going to talk in a roundtable about such a complex aspect as financing. And every one of us agree that financing is not a factor for success, but it's a factor for failure in the companies. And if we do not have adequate financing to the projects, it's quite difficult. We can be success in our action. And we are going to talk about new challenges for post-COVID financing and how has been the impact on corporate and finance sectors of COVID. Okay, I want to make a small introduction, very synthetic, very easy, but when we are talking about financing, all of us know that we are talking about three main variables, which is risk, profitability, and liquidity. And if always is important especially for the risky ones, the SMEs and the new the technologies and innovation, in this moment is much more important the risk factor than in any other time, because this gives a special importance to knowing how to measure the risk. And it now more than ever, it shows us that it's an essential skill for the financier and the investor in this moment, how to measure this risk of the investments. It was important to try to analyze the company on the whole of the company, and not only on finance related aspects. In this moment is much more, because we are immersed in a demand crisis. And now it's quite difficult to know what is going to happen to the company, because most of the times, especially in the small and medium companies, the demand has been decreased or has changed completely, and they have to make an effort in how to reorientate strategically from the strategically point of view, to reorientate their own action as a company and their own purpose and mission. And this is what we understand that is a challenge for finance, and trying to help the companies and to rebuild themselves on a new strategical. And I have to say that in IVASE, we have make a bet for this. And we have created a mechanism of analysis, on the deep analysis on financed by European funding. We have created different tools to help the companies to reanalysis of the strategical orientation of the company. And it gives some guarantees to the investor and the financiers to know more about other aspects of the company, like, for instance, digitalization of the company, talents and markets, internationalizations, all other aspects, degree or art situation of technologies, and all this knowledge that the financier is not able to, or has not the possibility to analyze on deep. And of course, this is the situation in COVID. We have a large number of affected companies in a risk of liquidity and immersed in a demand crisis, and reductions in revenue expectation or inability to cut the costs in the rapidity they need to for the treating the basic ratios of the company. With the decline of earnings, the long-term viability of many firms, especially small and medium-sized companies, is threatened. It is easy to understand that in order to know if a company is going to be successful or not, we need to have a holistic view of the company. And financial historical data or collaterals will not be sufficient to analyze the future of the company. If this is the scenario, we have to think in terms of not doing business as usual. We must be creative in order to help our companies. If the way we analyze investing or financing risk is, we have to change, we have to be more creative in this way, also in regulatory aspects, and be more creative in general. If this is the situation, we are going to have a roundtable in 4 different points of view, which is, of course, is not a complete view of the finance problematic. Financing companies is very complex and has different stages and different ways of financing. But we have chosen 4 points of view. One point of view is from a public financial institution. The other point of view is from what we have to empower, which is this intermediation of financing, and in this case is crowdfunding as a new, not so new, but a starting tool for financing companies. We also have a point of view from the regional perspective in Germany, and also a very interesting focus of cascade financing as a way of improving action. Let's see if at the end of this roundtable we can abstract or we can reach to some general conclusions. It is not easy, but I think in general aspects, after we will have this roundtable, maybe we have some interesting conclusions. After this introduction, I want to pass the floor to Mauricio O'Brien. Mauricio O'Brien is going to speak us about the role of crowdfunding. He joined in May 2020 as a camp manager for the Spanish strategic group of European crowdfunding network. As a crowdfunding coach and training facilitator, he acts as institutional relations advisor in European projects linked to civic crowdfunding, social innovation, and regional development. Mauricio provides his expertise support to the ECN, training and capacity building programs with regional and local entities with the framework of ECN. He has over 15 years of experience in design and ECT and working with academic institutions in higher education. Before giving him the floor, I'm going to ask two questions because maybe along his speech he can answer these two questions. How has COVID impacted the crowdfunding industry? And how will ECSP affect the future of the access to finance through crowdfunding? Mauricio, I think you are on the meeting. I can see you. Okay.
Connected on the screen. Thank you very much, Roberto. Thank you very much, EURADA, for organizing this session of AGORADA 2020. It's a great chance and a great opportunity to participate. I'm going to step in with a small presentation to bring in probably the topics that you're already questioning, which is that the clear impact of COVID in the crowdfunding ecosystem. Okay, we have to understand it as a live ecosystem in which there's participating a lot of different actors, stakeholders, in combination with society and digital tools for financing. And secondly, hopefully a more optimistic point of view in which we sort of jump in what is the new legislation or which is the new framework which we could be sort of positive about on how it will develop in upcoming years. And the most recent ones, we know what's going on. I'm going to share my presentation directly with you. So we're on screen. Can you see my presentation okay?
Yes, perfectly.
Yeah, super. Okay, the intent, thank you very much for the context of this challenging opportunities in the COVID financing the post-COVID. It would be a great chance to give you an overview of the European crowdfunding network. We've been working for innovative ways of funding through platforms and different actors. I wanted to give you a first picture on the sort of actual context before the COVID situation, 2019. This is the map of volume of crowdfunding in the European context, in which we could imagine that the size of the different countries, the size of the different initiatives are related a lot to SMEs and startups and many other initiatives look for funding through crowdfunding. And to give you this overview, overall, it's over 2,000 million euros were raised thanks to crowdfunding in 2019. Okay, and we must say that crowdfunding does not compensate but supplement traditional financing. And as in a way, this geographical map, I have this diagram that will already relate the combination of the different tools. I think this is one of the most positive things of crowdfunding, how it could be combined with the existing mechanisms, to reinforce the ways different initiatives could get access to finance. As I said, it's a combination of different tools. So it's one more that we could add. What happens as the COVID hit hard in Europe? Which was the early impact? And this is where I want to introduce you some findings, some insights within the European Crowdfunding Network. We did a report at the beginnings of that it was launched in April this year, in which we were trying to bring in the first touching points into the crowdfunding. Okay, and I briefly want to just highlight some of those points. We saw that there is this first insights in the 14 different countries that participated in our survey. I did analyze how the differentiations in between the financial tools as equity or lending platforms could be, and the non-financial tools as donation and reward platforms. Okay. Obviously, in the first one, in the financial, it's connected directly to a very negative impact at first. You know, even in the lending aspects, there were the inflows had a negative impact of the 50%. So it was very, very hard. It was very hard. While in the donation and reward, which is a more general tool and a non-financial tool, had a bit of a mix. You know, in which there was a high negative, but at the same time, there was a very high and positive impact on the capital sort of access. We had short-term indicators that told us, obviously, that there was a need for capital was increasing in different businesses and different organizations, and they were looking towards that capitalization through crowdfunding, as obviously the requirements for short-term financing were growing and were stepping. We understand that crisis obviously makes the needs of capital more, you know, like they flourish even more. In a general sort of limitation, so those links to those general limitations obviously had a direct relationship in between the larger operations. The larger business sectors were the ones that had more difficulties to access finance through crowdfunding. Yet, what it was more related initially to social and solidarity initiatives remained, you know, in a large way, largely better off, because obviously there was a direct combination with the civic engagement at the beginning of the crisis. How do we articulate those impacts? What was the role of the different platforms? With implementation, there was a very agile procedure already related to the different crowdfunding platforms, implementing quick measurements to reensure new funding opportunities in this time of crisis. There's a responsibility within the different platforms by working the communication with their communities, from promoters to investors to those backers, donors, whoever was participating in their platforms, reaching out on a specific topics, proactively seeking out that reach out to other new investors, or even implementing new rules, or even waiving their fees down. They were trying to, the platforms, no matter what, did attract those new projects, you know, from training, providing information to support screening projects. I think there's a very good example of mediation that already Roberto was pointing out, for the best of our purpose, the survival chances in the current situation. Okay, there was an extra support through the platforms in which there were preparations of contingency plans for provisioning information and connected to the government subsidies. Now there's this co-responsibility of platform, citizenship, and governments was done in such hard times. Looking towards the future, maybe this is the step, you know, in which we have to contextualize that crowdfunding, or the blooming, or the booming of this alternative funds as part of the collaborative economy, and taking into account what our colleague and Mr. Wasdorp did mention, the functionalities of this alternative funding are crucial, and especially now in times of post-COVID scenarios. We have to understand those midterm expectations, which are able to support those companies into accessing funding even more than before, and we have to be like sort of precise on how the crisis may have difficulties on more traditional ways of funding, and crowdfunding brings in a more agile procedure and mechanisms to support those initiatives and those access to funding. We have to link to impact. We realize that in this new normality comes a renewed visions on how we should face the future. Therefore, we're talking about how social initiatives with impact or sustainability investments are expected to increase within the crowdfunding platforms in a midterm post-COVID situation. Okay, and this will give us a longer run and a longer vision, more in a territorial way, even national, regional, or local. How could it be supported? There's new ways on hybridization of these mechanisms, hoping that would be included in government-led initiatives, and especially through match funding as one of the cases, and therefore there's in June 2020, we published with the support of ABI, was published the crowdfunding with the structural fund opportunities, especially directed to managing authorities. So I would invite you to double check it. And finally, probably the most optimistic way, the most optimistic point of view, that within this past October, there was the European crowdfunding service providers business for regulation came out. It was published, and it relates already directly to the changes that will come up in the short 1 year when the national laws, and hopefully in the new scenarios in the short or midterm, in which this scenario does bring the opportunity for many platforms and many SMEs and startups to access that funding, and scaling of the volume, consolidating their terms and partnership and this more institutional investment or investment funds. How do we connect? But the most important thing, it would be that the implementation of the ECSP will facilitate these startups and SMEs by harmonizing the rules within the European context, giving a more smoothly connection across the different European countries, across and cross-border actions related to funding. We have to, and just to finalize, we have to understand that fintech in general and crowdfunding in the specific can help to bring agile solutions that are reliable, that are building bridges in between different mechanisms and different ways, and we may have to think that the demanding of funding has to be a combination of these different tools and mechanisms, and we could do it in a very innovative way thanks to the digital economy. Okay, and I want to just close with this. You will have an opportunity to check all our information online. If you're interested, just send me your questions related more to policy or the training, research, or conduct, code of conduct that we establish as part of our mission and our objectives. And just once more, I want to thank you the opportunity to present in such a great context.
Thank you, Mauricio. It has been a complete view of what has been happening after and now, and what is the future of crowdfunding, and as an emerging way of financing, especially focus on those who are much more, who are less attractive for investors and normal financing as commercial banking. And I think this process of disintermediation of the financing scenario is the way we have to follow, because especially in those countries in the south who are completely bankarized, and the dominion of the banks are not the best solution for the really risky options of the market. Okay, I think the next speaker is Astrid Sox. Is Astrid Sox in the conference at the moment?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'm going to introduce Astrid. It's Astrid Sox. She's there since July 2019. Astrid is CEO of Regional Management Northern Hesse, a public-private enterprise to promote economic growth in the region of Northern Hesse. Prior to this, and still ongoing, she has been since 2015 head of the cluster mobility and its mobility and logistic networks. Before that, she gained over 13 years of experience in international project dealing with various topics of innovation management and technology transfer. Astrid studied European science, technology and society studies in Oslo, Norway, and did her PhD in innovation science at Lund University in Sweden. She worked in both research projects and as a lecturer at the University of Lund in Kassel, Germany, and worked in Tanzania for the non-governmental organization STIPRO, which deals with science, technology, and innovation issues to support economic development. Astrid has also been a lecturer at the International School of Management, ECM, in Frankfurt since September 2018, and Astrid as well is a volunteer on the board of Network for Renewable Energy, the ENET, and member of the New Club of Paris. Astrid, I want to ask you two specific questions, and maybe along your speech you can answer them. The first one is, how has your organization been affected by the new challenges resulting from the pandemic, and in which ways are you involved in supporting companies? Second one is, what has your federal government been designing to cope with the economic restraints caused by the coronavirus pandemic to support investment in Germany? It's your floor. You can say.
Thank you very much, Roberto. Thank you very much to EURADA for inviting me today to this very interesting day with very important topics that are concerning all of us. Do you have the slides and would like to share them? Otherwise, I'm just talking. I think you don't, or I can't see any slides here on my screen, but it doesn't matter. Oh yeah, there they are. But so going to your questions is, firstly, what are we doing? We are, like you were introducing, a public-private organization, a typical regional development organization. We have in Northern Hesse a very strong industry focus on the mobility sector, the decentralized and renewable energy sector. Very important is also health and tourism, and the ICT sector. We also have a young startup and innovation ecosystem that is emerging, and in that regard also a business competition that we are running every year, where we are supporting and advising how to found a company, and then also in the process that is also together with EURADA focusing on scale-ups and how to best support companies in their efforts to grow and scale up. So we are a very experienced cluster organization. Like you were introducing, I've been heading the mobility sector for 5 years now, and last year we have been celebrating our 15th anniversary. So a long tradition in linking up and supporting companies, small ones and very large and international ones, in their business context and various forms of support. And so we do have, of course, a wide variety of projects, right? They are ranging from small network meetings that take place on a regular basis, connecting the stakeholders on a regional level and other forms of regional projects. Then we have national projects where we collaborate with other stakeholders and partners in Germany, and also like the scale-up projects, for example, international projects, all with a focus on how to foster innovation, how to assist companies in their various facets and process in their daily life, and all pretty much at the interface also of science and industry. Then if you could move on to the next slide, please. So how have we been affected by that? Very important. As a development agency, as such, regional development agency as such, for us, we have been fine during the year, but heavily affected in projects. We have very different projects with different funding rates, right? I mentioned to you the different levels. You can imagine, those familiar with us among of you, that there are some different funding rates. Some are 90-95%, and then the 50%. That's typically what we receive from the German state funding, 50%. And then we had, of course, companies in our cluster that have had, we have heard that in the introductory speech already, like in the Netherlands, the different bridging loans. We have that same format in Germany as well. Very, very helpful. But of course, all the companies affected that had to use that, it was helping them, but at the same time, they have not been able to sponsor, you know, large amounts of money to these, well, different forms of projects that they wanted to support. For example, the business competition that is run in Northern Hesse is a 50% funded project, and that has been a real challenge. We have been managing that, but yeah, we had to look for new sponsors, and as you all know, this is difficult in the current situation, but also to realize with joint forces, it has also stimulated and reinforced some sort of togetherness, you know, to go through this together and try not to lose, you know, important tools like, for example, the business competition. And what else have we been doing? We have been developing new digital formats, as I'm sure many of you have been doing, but to stress, this has been important for the companies. You know, what could we offer for them? Because we usually used to meet physically for the network meetings and visit maybe a production somewhere and, you know, use these informal business contacts for future projects. We have moved that entirely into the digital sphere, and very successfully. We've been offering companies to present, you know, we have had the home office manager and different platforms that companies have experienced, or new marketing formats to share, you know, and to make, to raise marketing and awareness around the new companies' concepts that have been developed. So we called it Movie News because our network is called MoviNet from the mobility sector. And this is like a real new format with a new logo, the Movie News. And companies have already been expressing that they will really appreciate to continue with that, you know, additionally, in addition to the formats that we have already had. So I think it's also something good, positive for the future. It's not, you know, it's not only an emergency because of the current situation, but the learning process that we will partly keep and take to the future. And yeah, and then also, it's not on the slide, but what else have we been doing to assist? Of course, we have been assisting companies, you know, in that process of applying for the funds that they get via the bridge loans, the Corona or COVID bridge loans. And it has been, those of us or the companies that are familiar with these application processes, sometimes it's easy and straightforward. For companies, startups maybe that haven't really been applying for lots of external funding, it can be quite confusing, you know, the different formula on the webpage and how you have to do that. So that has been a new and specific task also to just guide through that process. And we all know dealing with such funding that is usually often a long and complicated, at least time-consuming process, even, you know, until you have received the actual funding. And this has been surprisingly fast and therefore also very great support. So this has been the very concrete things for our companies really dealing with on a day-to-day basis, what we've been offering. And maybe briefly to the next slide, also just to give you an overview on the more macro level to frame all of that, the economic stimulus and crisis package, and what management package, you know, to be derived from that. You may know that also from the news. Germany's governing coalition agreed on a 130 billion stimulus package to help relaunch the country's economy. And overall, similar to what we heard from the Netherlands already. Overall goals, of course, being boosting the consumer spending, investing in innovation, and ease the financial strain on German families and citizens. And then within this federal government, within this, we have the future package, which is a subset of that overall stimulus package, you know, to cope with the economic restraints that are caused by the coronavirus pandemic. And this is comprising measures in several areas to support investment in Germany. So just to give you a rough overview, which measures are we having? So with respect to stimulating consumption, various measures have been introduced. Most important is the reduction of the VAT rates from 19% to 16% and from 7% to 5% from July. We started with that back in July, and the plan is to continue it until the end of the year, meaning that the rate for restaurant meals are reduced to 5%. And then also social security contributions will be capped for both employees and employees until the end of 2021, actually. Contribution will not exceed 40% in total for employers and employees. Then we have incentives for companies. The federal government intends to increase the investment grants from the Joint Task Economic Development Program by 500 million euro and to further strengthen Germany as a location for innovation. The assessment based off the recently enacted Research Tax Credit Act will be also increased. And in addition, Germany will provide an additional 1 billion euro for R&D activities to generate innovation, you know, all like new technologies, processes, and equipment, and for new innovation clusters also, particularly within the automotive supply industry, for the current and also for the coming year. And we have tax-related measures. Companies will have better opportunities to depreciate assets. At present, assets can only be written off by straight line depreciation with the purchase price of the asset being distributed evenly over the coming year, and the use of a declining balance method of depreciation will be introduced temporarily. So this means that company will enjoy a higher rate of depreciation in the first years of use of the assets, which will lead to higher deductible expenses. And in addition, also there will be exceptions for the depreciation of digital assets in order to promote the digitization of the economy. This will also be beneficial for startups, obviously. So then we have the possibilities for tax loss carryback, and this will be extended, and the law on corporate income tax will also be modernized. Then we have an e-mobility bonus as part also of this future package. The government will actually double the amount of existing purchase incentives for electric vehicles to support the economy also after the coronavirus, and this corresponds to a cash grant of 6,000 euro for a battery electric vehicle. And in addition, the car manufacturers will also grant a subsidy of 3,000 euro, adding up to a bonus of 9,000 euro. Then healthcare, very important, of course. The federal government is stating a public health service pact to strengthen support for building and upgrading the technological and digital capacities of local health authorities, funding for hospital investments, then funding for German efforts to develop a COVID-19 vaccine. Well, we know the current results also. The objective is to ensure that a safe vaccine is available as soon as possible, and it's on the way already. So then another important area is the CO2 reduction and national hydrogen strategy. I think this is also pretty familiar. It's also across Europe, really high investments, and CO2 building refurbishment program will be increased actually by 1 billion euro for the period up through 2021 as well. And hydrogen technology is very, very high on the agenda currently and seen as an important approach to decarbonizing the energy system, and Germany to be a leader in the field of hydrogen technology. And then finally, we have the artificial intelligence and digitization. And this is gaining momentum in terms of both content as well as funding. The federal funds for the development and application of the technology are increased by 2 billion euro, and in conjunction with the update of the federal government's AI strategy, with this to be published soon, more investment in data platforms and computing capacities for AI real-time applications will be possible. So this is to give you an overview over our concrete regional Northern Hesse, and then also the more meta perspective applying to all of Germany. Thank you very much, and looking much forward to further discussing and engaging with you today.
Okay, thank you very much, Astrid. You have given us a complete vision of what you are doing at your institution and how active you are trying to help our companies or your companies, and it's going to be a good example for us. The level of actions you have already implemented. I'm going to introduce you. Antonio Vandres is head of International Financing Department in the EU. And I think I have already before introduced you, but I'm going to repeat it because with the technical problem, we don't know if the rest of the audience has here. I think you are 20 years working in ECO and you know ECO is the Institute for Credit, official Institute for Credit at the national government in Spain. And you have been in charge with project finance, corporate debt, and divers for financial products, with a background in private equity, also focusing the implementation and management of infrastructure funds. International financing department is responsible, I think, for large scale projects abroad done by Spanish companies. So you have a great experience of this internationalization of big companies or companies in Spain, and mainly in infrastructure projects, as well as coordination and supervision of EU facilities. And you are, I think, completely know what is happening with this new funding coming from the EU. I will ask you two specific questions. One is, what about the MEFF and NGEU that will bring to the table a vast financial commitment within the EU that has to be accounted together with traditional financing? And according to this new context of COVID, we all are familiarized with big figures, but could you further detail on how it can be complementary on the ECO and traditional financial facilities? And my second question is, ECO has implemented a COVID facility, which I think is it has had a good result among the Spanish companies. And in this new facilities, you have introduced the capacity of guarantee in a high rate percentage, the risk of the companies. What lessons learned and what is expected in the horizon for this facility? When is your time, Antonio, when you want?
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I appreciate this opportunity. Of course, well, I will try to synthesize, no? But first of all, I think just in one slide, who we are, trying to understand what has been our role and what is expected to be our role, especially in the future, and answering your question. And well, ICO is Instituto de Crédito Oficial, is a credit institution, is attached to the Ministry of Economy and Digital Transformation through the Secretary of State of Economy of European Economic Affairs and Business Support. And we have our own legal personality, asset and treasury. We are acting autonomously in our management, and we do not consolidate, and this is important, with the state accounts. we do not resort to the general state budgets, capturing its resources on capital markets, and with the guarantee of the state, explicit guarantee of the state, we act in the financial markets, funding our own resources as financial institution. On occasion with certain policies, we act as a financial agency of the state, implementing policies and financial facilities that are mandated by the government. So we have a double role. We are a bank regulated by the Bank of Spain, by the Economic Authority, like any other financial institution. And we have a second role as financial agency of the state, which is out of our balance sheet and where we implement policies. In this regard, I'm going to this second role and activity. Well, since March, I'm going to your first question, what has been our role, very synthesized on this COVID situation. The Spanish government launched a comprehensive set of measures to support the companies and self-employees that suffer the sudden stop of their revenues, as you all know, to trying to cope with this financial extreme impact of the COVID-19. Two measures were launched, facilities summing up 140 billion euros. You can see on the top left on the screen, 100 billion euros aimed initially at support liquidity and working capital needed, maintaining, of course, the flow of payments among companies and its suppliers, creditors and clients, all the economical environment. And the second of 40 billion euros to support the new investment and to foster the recovery process. More thinking on this second phase. Warranty lines have also companies access liquidity through markets. We issue an additional facility of fixed income alternative market, which is the MARF in Spain, which was guaranteeing also promissory notes where ICO deployed in parallel purchasing in the program and catalyzing the financing beyond the banking sector, trying to find alternative financial solutions to the traditional banking market that, as you all know, in Europe and especially in Spain is extremely developed, completely different what we have in the United States, and here finding alternative ways of financing other than private equity, we consider is extremely relevant. So far, this has been the largest private public partnership between the government and ICO and under the financial level. Companies self-employed people allowing to mobilize more than 110 billion euros and almost 910,000 loans, 98 to SMEs and self-employed, and mostly used to most affected sectors in Spain, which is the case with tourism, transport, or retail. To put into perspective the effort that supposed this COVID facility of, as I mentioned, 110 billion euros and nearly a million of transactions, the total banking activity in a year in Spain is around 400,000 billion euros. So in a couple of months, we cover 25% of the total yearly activity of the full banking sector. And we have to take into account that the banking sector, and this is coming to reinforce what I already said, that the need of alternative financing, the European banking sector is the second largest, and we were overpassed only in 2016 because we were the first banking sector compared to GDP in the world. So the effort has been enormous, but it has been a shared effort of ICO, the financial institution, the administration, and at the end, of course, of the companies that receive the liquidity or the loans, but need to make an additional effort to cope with this COVID situation. All these measures are facing a crisis that is especially affecting on the short term, on the medium term, but we will try that it doesn't affect on the long term. And in this regard, we are trying to accelerate undergoing structural changes that were already ongoing, and the second facility of 40 billion euros target these structural changes, these investments, this long-term view of the recovery phase. Well, on the right hand, you can see that together with the facilities on liquidity and on investment on loans, the private equity has also been reinforced with a facility additional of 2.5 billion euros on top of the existing 2 billion euros facilities. Considering the reduced private equity market in Spain, that has been a strong effort, and that has been extremely significant to the environment of private equity funds as a fund of funds, which is the Fondico Global. And in the fixed income alternative market, I already mentioned, this is the second alternative financing being provided to the market. We did two facilities, a facility backing guaranteeing those liquidity took by buyers of this MARF alternative market, as well as taking our own risk on this issue of the MARF alternative liquidity market in Spain. Way ahead, this is what has been done up to now. But on the way ahead, we have a first challenge, which is to manage the continuous crisis, because the crisis is still ongoing, and we have to provide and to adapt these measures to strengthen the viable companies and its solvency. In this regard, there is a new deadline on June 1st, 2021. And on the second phase, there will be eligible companies with standing guarantees that could apply for an extension of 3 years on maturity and 12 months grace period extension. So this will be on the way forward, how we will be supporting those companies that have existing facilities on the long term will be still affected. But second, and answering your questions on the European budget and how we combine our facilities and our activity with the European funds, we have all in mind the big figures of the European budget. We have the recovery plan of Europe comprising of the next generation EU of 750 billion euros, as well as the reinforced MFF 21-27 with the 1.074 trillion euros. This 1.8 trillion euros, summing up the two blocks of recovery plan, have several facilities within its different lines. But I would like to summarize that as a financial institution or as a company, there are three main ways of being beneficiary of this budget, which is a grant, which is as a bank receiving funding or directly as a company, and the other which is receiving a guarantee. So these three facilities that are within the budget has to be interpreted by as an institutional financial institution, and we needed to find, and we need to find, because the approval process, as you all know, is ongoing in the coming weeks, trying to adapt our existing facilities to this new funding complement, and trying to translate this line by line budget into specific products that could be used by Spanish companies. So I will go to my presentation. Well, the new NGEU, that is 750 billion euros, 750 trillion thousand or trillion euros. Well, regarding the grants, we have still not the way it's going to be implemented by each country, because it has been already allocated country by country. But I will try to synthesize instead of going one by one. So as I mentioned, there will be guarantees, there will be grants, and there will be funding. Liquidity is not a problem anymore in the market. There is strong flow of liquidity. So I think we have to, of course, focus on what is the grant component and how can we take profit of these grant components as well as the guarantees. So I will take your attention on InvestEU, which will be one of the main new products, which is a split between the MFF and the NGEU, and will be translated, because this is the allocation on cash, which is the reserve on the guarantee, but it's a guarantee product, will be translated into 26 billion euros guarantee. And how will it work? It will have 4 windows, and we will be, as financial institution beneficiary of this guarantee to implement loans and facilities that have additionality to our standard activity. So we have our first conclusion. We've been doing an activity up to now, which was our traditional banking activity. During the COVID crisis, let me come back to this slide, we've done an extraordinary, in cooperation with other institutions, private and the government, activity as financial state agency through the guarantee of the state, because it has been operated through the guarantee of the state. The COVID facility is a guarantee provided by the government, by the state, that has taken our activity to the peak that we reached in 2012 during the last crisis, the state crisis. After the 2008 crisis, there was a second dip, as you remember, and we reached our peak as counter-cyclical institution. With this COVID facility, which is a guarantee facility, we reach again, out of our balance sheet, because it's a guarantee, as I mentioned, we reach again a peak of 110 billion euros activity in lending through guarantees. Now, with the new funding of the next generation, we have to be as well counter-cyclical and do activities that are out of our standard activities, out of our standard assumption of risk. This InvestEU will be a way of implementing loans that go beyond our standard levels or standard assumption of risk. And this is the idea, to target those sectors that, or those sectors that traditionally were beneficiary of financing, and because of the situation of the economy or because of the need of new technology, needs a different risk perspective, of higher risk perspective of assumption or additionality. This is the guarantees, but we also have the grants. CEF grants, Connecting Europe Facility, is another block of grants that was on the existing MFF, 2014-2020, and will be extended in the next MFF. How we've been working with this CEF facility is through blending, which is a financial structure that I think it could be replicated in some other grants, some grants lines on the budget, through the way of giving loans in parallel with grants. This will be the blending structure that it could be replicated in the next MFF, that it has been used and is being used in the actual MFF. And honestly, from the point of view of a financial institution, we think it really triggers investments that in other or without it wouldn't have happened. So that will be a second conclusion. I would say that first, the guarantees will trigger, will boost, will reinforce our activity as financial institutions. Secondly, the grants combined with debt, because a grant never covers 100%, such as the CEF Connect, CEF NR, and Transport, such as Horizon Europe, which is significant, 79.9 billion euros. Those guarantees that are widely known by the companies and by the implementing partners will be also parts of the budget that I think there is a know-how to implement that could be used by the companies straight away from the very beginning of next year, where the MFF should be starting the soonest as possible, because the needs of the companies are of course extreme. I will not extend on one by one, but we could find how can we profit if we go by line in this presentation of these guarantees, of these grants, or of this liquidity funding, that I left on the third position. But it's also important that this is a viability budget. Of course, we are complementing this viability budget as financial institution, but we need to identify the appropriate projects that this budget or even our own activity is targeting. And in this regard, I will use two examples of strategic sectors that the European Commission has targeted, and those sectors, for being strategic, are going to be beneficiary with a high priority of these products that I mentioned. And I will underline, because those two sectors combine one main holistic target that we as institutions and the European Commission has, which is of course the sustainability and the digitalization. And in this regard, we have of course the how not, and it was already mentioned by some of the panelists, the hydrogen sector, and also we have the offshore wind farm project sector. Regarding the offshore wind renewable energy, this is a sector that it will be promoted by some of the products that I mentioned that are within the budget of the European Union. More specifically, it will be in InvestEU, in the Recovery and Resilience Facility, in the Connecting Europe Facility, and Horizon Europe. So I think like the conclusion would be that as institutions, we need to have in parallel to our internal accounting, reporting, implementation of the products, we have to have a strategy of targeting those projects that are within the sectors that are going to be promoted and that are strategic for the European Union, and therefore will be main objective and strategic objective of any of the products that we see within the budget. The other is hydrogen, that is even more supported by the European budget, because we combine here a strong need of development, of industrial development, together with the benefits of the sustainability and of course the storage of renewable energy, which is the main philosophical stone that we are all looking for. And in this regard, hydrogen will be benefiting of 7 of the facilities that we mentioned are within the European budget. It will be benefit of InvestEU, Resilience and Recovery Facility, Connecting Europe Facility, ETS Innovation Fund. This is on top of wind farm projects offshore, REACT-EU, and Horizon Europe. So let me come to a conclusion in 1 minute. What has been done has been based in the guarantees. So guarantees will be a tool that has a significant success, at least this is our perception, where we team up with the measures taken by the Spanish government, by the private financial institution. Teaming up through the base of a guarantee is something that works, and the experience demonstrates that. Secondly, looking forward, we have to adapt those guarantees to the needs of the companies on the long term and medium term through extending the amortization period, the tenor of the loans, or through extending the grace period. On top of the guarantees that will be significant in the new budget, we also will have to look carefully how we implement these grants, because the grants never go alone. So somehow we will have to combine these grants with the traditional banking activity and, of course, with the new alternative financing that are already in place. And we as financial institutions are part of those institutions promoting these alternative financial institutions. And regarding the liquidity, as I mentioned, of course, there is a strong liquidity in the market, but we also have to look that sustainability affects to the asset activity, to the investment activity, but also to the liabilities activity. And green financing, green bonds, social bonds, this is the new trend on adapting this strong liquidity, but on improving the target of this liquidity. And we as financial institutions have to be attentively innovating on our liability side, especially targeting the sustainability and digital development that affect transversally to all sectors. So I think good news of what has been done and the results on the new facilities trying to to recover and trying to lower the impact of the crisis. And regarding the new budget, I think there will be very interesting and very successful products, but we have to work from now to implement them.
Okay, thank you very much, Antonio. I think it has been a very interesting view from the big figures and how the Commission is implementing new funding, is extending new funding, and how you as a national financial institution are trying to cope with these new ideas and how you have been able to introduce a big range of guarantees to this and combine it with grants. We are not so well with time, and I give the word to Cuba. I'm going to introduce Cuba to you. Cuba is quite difficult for me to pronounce the surname. Kruszelnicki is working on European projects since 2007 with research and development and innovation in cooperation with Transfer Center of Krakow University of Technology, and also working in the University Autónoma de Barcelona after he was at the LEITAT Technological Center as manager of knowledge, innovation, and market projects. And in 2014, Jakub went back to Poland as a director of Krakow Center of Transfer of Technologies. In 2018, went to Berlin with the Horizon 2020 Oasis project. And 2019 was co-founder of Creative Lab. And now, which is the most important aspect in this conference, is works for Funding Box, which is an experience of cascade funding. And there he is expert in technology transfer and also with data exploitation and sustainability. I'm going to ask you, as the rest of speakers, two questions. How can cascade finance, first to know what's cascade financing and how it can help companies in their digitalization process? And my second question is, how can regional development agencies, EURADA members, follow existing open calls, opportunities, or even launch their own calls? Jakub?
Yeah, thank you very much. The usual question in the beginning, can everybody hear me and see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. So thank you very much for this introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation for this conference. It's very nice to be on Agorada again. I have to say that I had pleasure to work with EURADA on Oasis project, like it was mentioned before. And yeah, since the beginning of our relationship with EURADA, we are exploring the ways of identifying, funneling, and supporting innovative SMEs in their way to bloom, to realize their potential, to grow as much as possible. So the Oasis project was a stepping stone on looking how regional development agencies can support those SMEs, how they can be segmented, and what measures are the most effective. And now I'm coming back to you with another concept, which is a concept of cascade funding that Funding Box is specialized in. So maybe I will start with a brief introduction of our track record. The Funding Box is a company that is close to 30 years on the market already. We are very international in European sense because we concentrate in 3 main hubs, Madrid, Warsaw, and Odense in Denmark. So we are collaborating in between crucial, let's say, covering all Europe. And we connect 2 interesting features in our ecosystem. From one hand, we've been building during 30 years this deep tech ecosystem, which has been materialized around 10 years ago as a community, online community of early adopters, mainly SMEs, interested in capturing new technological trends and incorporating them into their new DNA. So we have right now around 30,000 of companies in our network. They are interested in deep tech solutions, and what we are serving them and what we are how we are helping them to become funding champions is via open calls, via those cascade fundings mentioned by Roberto before. And we have been delivering this scheme mainly via European projects, Horizon 2020, around 50 projects that have been implemented by us, and around 50 open calls already closed with a full cycle, and around 130 million euros distributed directly to the companies. Apart from this community component and open call component, we are proud to have also an acceleration program on board. One of them can be materialized at Impact Poland, which is mainly devoted to Industry 4.0, as well as our venture capital that has been recently launched. So we are trying to cover all the value chain. We are trying to funnel SMEs in an effective way towards the adoption of new technologies and also, of course, digitalization. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about the cascade funding, which is a way that regional development agencies are also using sometimes. It's called in a European slang FSTP, so financial support to third parties, where the European Commission provides bulk funding with bigger quantities via projects in order to spread in a smaller tickets to third parties. So startups, SMEs, trying to via one project stimulate all the, let's say, overall early adopter groups and try to start the snowball effect or try to fit into the technological development trends. So basically we are situated as this intermediary between European Commission mainly and third parties SMEs. Also, European Commission is not exclusive provider of this bulk funding for Cascade. Sometimes corporate players very much interested in technological challenges do that. Sometimes we also work with regions to help funnel this ERDF funding towards the end users. And this is the general scheme that we are using. Basically, our way of doing it has 3 value propositions that I think are are important to emphasize. From one hand, we have a simplified application form where cascade funding is very much simpler, faster way to access funding. It's very on the other side of the road when we are comparing it with EU funding programs and applications. So we are trying to minimize the volume of applications and evaluation times, and try to react as fast as possible, and also be flexible in this reacting, which I will mention around the COVID examples. From the other hand, bringing technology to the market. So those mechanisms are facilities for adoption of new digital technologies, allowing companies to test them before invest. The famous scheme, or the famous words saying test before invest, which is very much linked to digital innovation hubs, where companies can access the technology, can look from the very close side how it does it work and how it integrates with their actual state of the art. This is something important, something interesting, and something that brings the community of early adopters towards us. And the third value proposition is grouped initiatives. So it's not really looking for a particular project or particular open calls emerging from particular consortium. We are operating within the complete ecosystem, within different umbrella projects that are orchestrating those, like, for example, I4MS, NGI, we are sectorially visible within this ecosystem. So if it comes to manufacturing, if it comes to robotization, if it comes to artificial intelligence, the domino effect of cascade fundings and the ecosystem of the project can be shown in a very clear and guiding way for SMEs. So the examples that should be probably, if you are interested in this cascade funding and how does it work in our environment, I invite you to follow projects that are mainly devoted. I4MS is an initiative, is a coordination support action that orchestrates all the projects related with intelligent manufacturing. So in this sense, we are trying to digitalize manufacturing companies via different technological solutions emerging from individual projects and funded by cascade funding. The other example is Change to Twin, which is trying to convince or trying to transfer this digital twin technology within the manufacturing companies. This is very interesting because we are not only using open calls to attract the companies that are looking for a solution, but also to certify digital innovation hubs and help them to promote their know-how, promote their portfolio, and use it also within this test before invest projects or tech transfer experiments that we also call them within this Horizon 2020. Then the Shop for CF is interesting also from the point of view of this labor transition, which is linked to the digitalization. We are talking here about a new era of human-centered robotics. So how to integrate the human factor and the Industry 4.0 and robotization into one organism and bring our companies to another level by using those kind of funding or those kind of collaborations that we can spark or wake up with this cascade funding. The other aspects that I wanted to mention today is open calls as a measure to fight COVID-19. So this is the particularity of open calls, which means the simplified mechanism, which means the shorter time to grant, is also allowing certain flexibility with distributing those funds, which we have been using, especially in this surprising time of 2020, where we realized that some technologies need extreme booster, extreme fast solutions provided, and extreme absorptions by the companies and by the society. So in this sense, open calls can can respond fast to such situation or such crises like COVID-19. I have prepared here two examples of it. One is Smart for All, where we were looking for customized low energy computing solutions and their applications to facilitating the COVID management crisis. This was one. And the other one was EdTech, Impact EdTech project, which was looking for educational solution for remote education, for transition to this homeschooling period in the most effective technological way. So as you can see, we are not only specialized in a long-term planning on how to distribute, how to convert bigger project into smaller tickets, but also how to use them in tailor-made solutions or as a tailor-made response. Then I think that the measures of success is, from one hand, the community that I have mentioned to you, which is deep tech early adopter SMEs that are coming from regions that are matching their needs with the expertise of digital innovation hubs, which are also coming from regions. And this can be monitored, can be canalized, can be in a certain way stimulated by our funding box community. And from the other hand, we have those funding opportunities. So open calls and the way of automatizing it and making it happen in a very optimized and simple way to do. So now I think as a summary, I hope that I have answered the questions, but if not, I would like to go back to them. How Cascade funding can support digitalization of SMEs. This is basically because of those technology transfer experiments that SMEs can access via this funding. They can test the technology before investing into it. They can check how it matches their expectations and their actual state. And they also can access this knowledge from local digital innovation hub, which is very important because they don't have to find the suitable expertise in other country in a very remote location. They can really access within their ecosystem digital innovation hubs that are in a certain way the second pillar that might be interesting for regional development agencies. So SMEs and the knowledge providers situated in your region can benefit from our activity. We would like to push a little bit more this practical side of how to use this Cascade funding, how to canalize the opportunities that emerge from it towards our SMEs, and how to capture funding champions from our region. That the companies that have made already a track record in international funding, in EU funding, via Cascade funding, and you could start work with them on a regional basis as early adopters, as those who are generating good practices, but need an additional push to get to scaling or to full adaptation of the technology. So we will be present in the next year. We will try to create this kind of a collaborative dynamics with EURADA members by appearing from time to time in a working group Industry 4.0, where we would like to put content around the networking with Industry 4.0, related opportunities and dissemination of open call opportunities, plus co-creation around this kind of mechanisms. We will also analyze SME digitalization trends emerging from this ecosystem, looking on how digital innovation hubs are growing into the future, into the 21-27 perspective, and also evaluate together regional SMEs, monitor their performance in a Cascade funding segment, emerging from those projects that we are representing. So I think that this was a brief intervention and the introduction of what we would like to do as a long-term collaboration and long-term mutual support and opportunities sharing with you, EURADA members. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Cuba. We are quite short of time for questions, and I'm going to not doing the direct questions I had to the speakers. One was from your point of view, what kind of what can we do as the development agencies, regional development agencies, to improve the SME financing? And the other question was, what kind of difficulties you or your financial markets have to evaluate risks in this special period of COVID? But first, I will give the word to Tessa because I'm sure there are some questions from the attendants. I don't know if Tessa, you have registered any interesting question.
Yes, Roberto, I did. Actually, I have one, and I think it's meant for all the speakers in your panel. It is, what has been the biggest hurdle, one, you can name only one, during this year of pandemic that affected the growth of the projects that you are implementing or supporting, and how did you overcome it?
Any one of you can answer the question?
Let me break the floor. Well, as responsible of international financing and projects abroad, I think our perspective is interesting because we've seen projects all around the world, not only in Europe, but also in Latin America, Asia, etc. And those projects, I'm speaking of large-scale projects in infrastructure of transport and energy especially, the biggest burden they found is the lockdown, because we've seen delays that come from 100 days to 150 days that were within the force majeure that we call in project finance, which is something that is accepted by the administration and do not affect substantially at the end to the numbers of the project. And this lockdown has stopped projects for periods of 100 days, as I mentioned, 120 days. And this for an economy is not only for the project, which, as I said, is not really affected because the concession adapt its numbers to it, is to all the suppliers, to all the companies around those projects.
Any other answer for the panelists?
Okay,
Okay, another question, Tessa?
Okay.
No, that was it. I think it's an overarching question for all of them. So.
Yeah, I can just with one sentence add to this answer. For us in our field, Funding Box was focusing mostly on two aspects that can help us with dealing with such a situation like a pandemic, which is digitalization and robotization. So this whole concept of helping manufacturing SMEs to automatize, to monitor better their manufacturing lines, to try to make it as digitalized as possible, can mitigate the risk of this non-remote, this physical, the need of physical presence in industrial sites. So I think that this test before invest is a kind of a evangelization process of digitalization and robotization, which should be accelerated right now because we can see that this will help us to defend our economy from the pandemic.
Thank you, Jakub.
Okay, Mauricio.
In our case, I do believe that the biggest burden is probably a shared burden in between all of us, that it was the uncertainty. You know, this moment in which we didn't know what was going to happen, how we were going to face it. But how do we tackle that uncertainty? By improving the creation of those alternative ways of funding. You know, reinforcing communities, reinforcing platforms, reinforcing the connections that internet brings us. And I think that the digital funding that brings in crowdfunding doesn't understand of those limits or those frontiers. So I do believe that the connection that we have within us has broken that uncertainty in somehow. Yet we have to clear out other points.
Thanks, Mauricio.
No.
I also think that it depends on the situation. It's not the same if we are talking about a startup, that if we are going about consolidated business or medium companies. And What we are really worried about are the SMEs, the more risky and depending on demand companies, which are not so strong from the financial point of view. And what I have to say is that when we have a lack of public resources, because at this moment we have a lot of public resources, but it's not going to long forever, and we have to be very exquisite in the way we choose where we to put this public money. And so for me, it's very important and being very accurate in how to analyze the risk, the strategy of the company. Because as you have said, Mauricio, the market has changed, the reality has changed, the new technologies are coming and are rising quickly. And I think we have to not doing business as usual. We have to think in different and try to disintermediate the markets, trying to get closer the people who has the money, who the nice projects, and it's not the same talking about a new co or new company, that consolidated company, that the difficulties they are going through are different. So it's a very complex subject, this of finance. So I think we will have time to discuss this aspect of finance. And I want to, I have the pleasure to announce that next year, AGORADA 2021, we hope it will be down in Valencia. And this AGORADA 2021, which is supposed to be in June of next year, if it is possible with the pandemic, will be focused on these aspects of the new scenarios of financing companies in the wide range of different situations and different companies and different stages of the companies. And I think in June we will have a more precise view of which is the scenario we are going to have in the post-COVID situation. And Tessa, any other question, or if we have time, but I think we are past.
I don't have any more questions.
Okay, it's 11:02. Maybe we have to pass to the new round table.
Yes, we have to give the floor to Andrea Di Anselmo.
Thank you very much to the panelists for your explaining.
A pleasure.
A pleasure.
Right.
One last organizing question. Did you take pictures for the social media from EURADA team?
My colleagues are doing that, yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Otherwise, I would have done it now.
Okay.